This moment should concern every American. When Senator Maggie Hassan asks a basic constitutional question, the Trump official is left speechless not from confusion, but from what the answer would expose. In that pause, the danger to the rule of law becomes impossible to ignore.
Secretary Noem, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff recently said that the Trump administration is actively looking at suspending habeas corpus. Last week you were asked about this, and I want to clarify your position because it's obviously really important to get this right. So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea. As a senator from the Live Free or Die state, this matters a lot to me and my constituents and to all Americans. So, Secretary Noem, do you support the core protection that habeas corpus provides, that the government must provide a public reason in order to detain and imprison someone?
Yeah, I support habeas corpus. I also recognize that the President of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide if it should be suspended or not.
It has never
Let us be clear, though,
it has never been done. It has never been done without approval of Congress. Even Abraham Lincoln got retroactive approval from Congress. So I have been asking executive branch nominees a simple question over the past few months. If the president orders them to break the law, I've been asking, will you follow the law or follow the order? I want to ask you a more specific question here. If the president tries to suspend habeas corpus and a federal court reverses the president's order, will you comply with the court order and uphold habeas corpus, or will you follow the president's directive?
We are following all federal court orders and are complying with that, as is the president, and every decision that I make as well.
That is obviously not true for anybody who reads the news. There are federal court orders right now, including returning somebody who was deported mistakenly. But to be clear, this is about a fundamental legal right that ensures that we live in a free society instead of a police state that would have a sham legal system like Russia or North Korea. So I'm glad that you have now committed to following court orders. I'm glad you believe in the basic freedom for Americans if ordered to do so by a court. And again, I want just to make clear that it is critically important that even if the president tries to suspend the right of people to know why they've been detained or imprisoned, if a federal court reverses that order, that you will follow that order. And I hope all the members of the administration will, because it's obviously critical that some of the people, for instance, who've been deported by mistake, who didn't get due process, be returned in compliance with court orders. So now, let's move on to another issue. International criminal organizations target Americans with sophisticated cyber crime, including elaborate scams that robbed Americans of billions of dollars, with seniors in the United States losing $5 billion to scammers in 2024 alone. As artificial intelligence improves, so does the ability of criminals to deceive and defraud Americans. With this new technology, criminals can impersonate loved ones, develop advanced malware, or make more convincing phishing messages. How is DHS working to identify trends in illegal activity and ensure that new AI systems have safeguards in place to prevent their use in criminal activity?
Yes, we are working extensively through CISA, but in all of our agencies to make sure that we're going after these criminal, nefarious actors. I would say partnering with private industry is critically important so that we have the insight that we need to really understand the tactics that they use and the advancements in software. The AI ability that they have to adjust and to supersede some of our systems is incredible. And so investing in those systems is important, but also having the knowledge and bringing everybody to the table and breaking down the silos between our agencies and our intelligence agencies is important, so we all have the information that we need to get.
Well, and that gets me to one final point and question here, because Senator Peters began to ask about it. There's been recent reporting that indicates that the Chinese government installed remote access to Chinese-made power inverters in the U.S., raising concerns that the Chinese government could try to disable parts of our power grid. And you made a comment following up on Senator Peters' question about the importance of not only working working with private industry on this issue, as you would also want to work on AI, but also on working with state and local governments on cybersecurity. And can you just talk to me a little bit about how DHS is partnering with state and local governments
Well, that's
right now
one of the core critical missions of CISA, is to help those state and local governments harden their systems. We're extremely vulnerable by our weakest link. And so when you have a small state that doesn't have the resources it needs to invest in these security operations, then they're vulnerable to attacks and hacking attempts, and they can access our systems. If they have a contract or a system that interfaces with the federal system, it makes us vulnerable as well. So we are responsible for 10 of the 16 critical infrastructures under the Department of Homeland Security, and making sure that China can't come in and shut down our electrical grid, our water systems, things that people rely on every day for their day-to-day lives is very important. So that's why we need these kind of partnerships, is to make sure that we're secure all the way down to our smallest actor that participates.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate working more with you on that. Thank you.
What you just witnessed wasn't a casual oversight, a slip of the tongue, or even a momentary misunderstanding. This was a top official of the Trump administration, Secretary Noem, demonstrating an alarming lack of understanding of one of the most foundational pillars of American freedom, habeas corpus, the very principle that stops our government from behaving like an authoritarian regime. And Senator Maggie Hassan wasn't just asking a routine legal question. She was probing something far deeper. Whether this administration is prepared to erode constitutional protections that have defined America for centuries. When Secretary Noem incorrectly framed habeas corpus as a presidential right to remove people and suspend their rights, Senator Hassan had to interrupt, because that level of confusion is not some small bureaucratic error. It's dangerous. Habeas corpus isn't a presidential power. It's a safeguard from presidential overreach. It's the firewall separating free citizens from indefinite imprisonment without explanation. The very line authoritarian governments cross when they want to silence critics or punish dissent. And here's what makes Hassan's exchange so striking. She wasn't just correcting a definition. She was exposing the broader mindset within an administration actively discussing the suspension of habeas corpus. Something so severe, it's been used only in moments of national crisis and never without Congress. Even Lincoln sought approval from Congress during the Civil War. That's how sacred this protection is. So when Hassan asked Noem what she would do if Trump tried to suspend habeas corpus and a federal court ruled against him, the answer mattered. It mattered to every American who believes in due process and constitutional rights. And despite the evasiveness, Hassan kept cutting through the political fog, forcing the basic commitment. Follow court orders, not unlawful presidential directives. But notice something else. Hassan repeatedly had to remind Noem of reality. She had to point out that the administration is already defying federal court orders, including orders to return people deported by mistake. That's why this moment wasn't just about legal terminology. It was about the danger of giving unchecked power to leaders who already ignore the courts when it suits them. And then Hassan pivoted into an entirely different national threat, one that affects everyday Americans right now. Cybercrime. AI-driven scams are targeting America's seniors. Chinese-built technologies may be granting Beijing remote access into parts of our power grid. These aren't distant hypotheticals, they're immediate threats demanding competence, clarity, and a deep respect for democratic process. So when a senior administration official, someone tasked with safeguarding the nation, struggles to explain the meaning of habeas corpus, it's not a small slip, it's a warning sign. How can we trust leaders to protect America's digital, electrical, and economic infrastructure if they can't even articulate the most fundamental principles that define our freedom? Senator Maggie Hassan's questioning wasn't about political theater or catching anyone off guard. It was about accountability, about testing whether those in power understand the very Constitution they've sworn to uphold. Her line of inquiry cut straight to the heart of democratic governance. That constitutional rights are not optional, not negotiable, and certainly not suspended when power feels inconvenient. In an era where cybercriminals are evolving faster than our defenses, where AI can fabricate entire realities, and where foreign adversaries are probing every weakness in our national systems, America cannot afford leaders who toy with authoritarian instincts while failing to grasp basic constitutional protections. This moment is bigger than one exchange in a Senate hearing. It's a reflection of what's at stake, whether we choose to protect the principles that have held this nation together, or allow ignorance and arrogance to erode them from within. That's why civic literacy matters. That's why congressional oversight matters. And that's why moments like this, broadcast in full public view, preserved on the record, are vital for a functioning democracy. If you believe in truth, accountability, and a more informed citizenry, don't just watch, engage. Subscribe, Capital Debate Files, share, and help others see what's really at stake when those in power fail the most basic test of constitutional understanding.